Guidance and discipline. This is something that's going to help you throughout your entire life working with children, not just in preschool lab, but also in your everyday life if you babysit or are around siblings or nieces or nephews. So, first of all, you have to ask yourself, what are the reasons for misbehavior? Kids typically will have a reason for why they're misbehaving. It's not that they're just trying to be bad or annoy you. They really do have a reason. And if we can figure out what the reason is, usually we can solve and figure out why they're misbehaving and how to handle it. So the number one or the first reason children misbehave is a stage of growth. It's normal for this age. So this could be something like a 2-year-old having a temper tantrum. It's perfectly normal. We don't like it, but they're trying to exert their independence and they want something. So instead, they'll have a temper tantrum. They'll cry and scream. When you get to elementary school age, it's a perfectly normal stage of growth for sibling rivalry, arguing or fighting with a sibling. When you get to middle school, it's normal for a child to swear or start to have attitude with their parents or backtalk. That's very common. So all of these are stages of growth that could be a reason for why they're misbehaving. It doesn't mean it's acceptable, but it means it's normal and it's a stage of growth we all go through. Number 2 is an unfulfilled need. And this means that the child's needs are not getting met. So the child's hungry. They didn't eat breakfast. So by 10:30, they're hungry. And maybe they're getting cranky at school. It could be a child didn't get enough sleep the night before. They're tired, therefore they're upset or they're whiny in the morning. Another one could be they didn't get enough love or attention at home. So when they come to school, they act like the class clown because they need something. They need that attention. They think they're getting it at home, but they're not. The environment, this is when the child is uncomfortable and they don't understand their environment. So this could be something like they are having a new school, a new house. Their parents are divorced and they have 2 new homes. It could be also something like a wedding or a funeral where they're dressed up or they're in an uncomfortable situation. That can cause children to misbehave. Lines, waiting in lines. That's an environment that children are uncomfortable and can get frustrated with. The fourth one is they don't know any better. They've never been taught, so they just don't know. So this could be something they've never been taught. Like a child you might see, starting to color on a wall. And they don't know that they're not supposed to do that because they color on paper. And this is a white, space. Why can't I color here? Well, it's a wall and we don't color on walls. But the child didn't learn that. If you don't teach the child, they don't know that they're not supposed to do that. Or the child that tries to get, a drink out of the refrigerator. Do they know that that's soda and they're not supposed to have that? If they've never been taught, they don't know. They thought they were getting themselves a drink and they were being independent. They didn't realize that that was something wrong. So sometimes we have to teach them. So with those 4 reasons for misbehavior, a lot of times we can solve problems and figure out, okay, so the child is acting like this in school. What could be the reason? And when we figure out the reason, that helps us to be able to solve it and to help guide them and discipline them. Now, you notice I used the word discipline. There's 2 main words here on this page, discipline and punishment. We try in preschool to use guidance to teach children. So we're using more discipline in a positive way. We're trying to teach them self-control. We're trying to teach them the right behavior. We want them to learn right from wrong. We also want them to understand what they did and give them the responsibility to show what they should do. So with discipline, it's more positive. This would be something like, okay, you may have hit another child, but in preschool, we share and we play nicely, and I might actually show them this is how we play and this is what we do instead. This is how it feels when you do this. And look, this child's sad. Here's why. So we try to teach them more positively. Whereas a punishment would focus more on punishing them, and we would just make it more negative and just say, you should not have done that, and here's what you're going to do. Because you can't behave, you're not allowed to play with friends today. You're going to have to sit in the corner or in a timeout. Sometimes punishment could be not in school, but at home. Sometimes punishment could be a spank, or it could be something like shaming the child, making them feel bad. That always is not always focusing on what the children should do and teaching them. It's more negatively viewed, a punishment. So let's take, for example, a high school student that has a curfew and they're out past their curfew. If the parent says, you know what, I'm upset with you, you were out past your curfew, if you want to go out tomorrow night, you're coming in 2 hours early. That's teaching them. It's also a fair way to show them and to give them responsibility, but also let them know that parents are in control and that they need to learn. Punishment, on the other hand, would be, that's it, you're grounded for the entire month and you're not going out anywhere for the entire month. It's more of a shutdown. This is what you're doing. You're going to be in isolation and you should never do that again. Whereas the discipline and telling them they're coming in early shows that they have to be in control of the situation, or they know the consequence and they realize that they've got to come in now 2 hours early. So it gives them a little bit of ownership, but also is teaching them, you were late, 2 hours late, you're now going to come in 2 hours early. Here are also some helpful hints or tips for positive guidance. Things to remember are role modeling. Examples. If you're telling your students, like if I told you guys never to swear in preschool, but I swore in preschool, you're not learning. You're not going to learn from me, right? Because I'm doing it, which of course I never would. But if that was the case, I have to lead by example. If I tell you not to chew gum in preschool, I'm not chewing gum in preschool. Another thing is consistency. Consistency is really important. If you want a child to learn, you have to be consistent. So that curfew has to be consistent, that we were talking about in the last slide. So I'm consistently going to say, your curfew is 11 o'clock. You need to come in by then. And if one time you're at 11:30, then you're coming in a half an hour early the next time, or whatever my, technique I'm going to use is. Consistency is not always fair in your eyes as a child. What works for one child may not work for the other child. So I could have one child that I could just snap my fingers, I could look them in the eye, and they would listen and know they were in trouble, and they would stop what they were doing. And they'd change their behavior. Another child might not do that. I could do the same thing, give them the snap of the fingers and maybe give them that evil eye, and they still wouldn't listen. So for that child, I may have to then do something else. Maybe put them in a timeout, whatever would work for that child. So please understand, comparing children does not always work here because it's not always consistent in that matter. It's consistency in the way in how you're doing it. If you're going to say, here's your curfew, then here's your curfew, and here's what happens if you don't. Another thing is we want to remember that when we punish a child, a lot of times they will rebel. This happens an awful lot, where children will rebel and then they just don't listen. And so it's important that sometimes when we're using discipline and we're trying to guide their behavior, we get further, and it tends to, be better for the child and the parent or the teacher. Sometimes children do misbehave for attention, so keep that in mind as well. We said that's a reason for misbehavior. Therefore, we need to give them attention, but in a better and a more positive manner, not when they're saying, please, oh, call me, oh, Miss Stauffer. All right, or if they're misbehaving, we don't want to give them attention for that. They need to get attention in a healthy way and a more positive way. And the last one is this blue one over here that says respond to aggressive behavior in non-aggressive ways. So if a child hits another child or bites another child, I'm not going to bite the child back and I'm not going to hit the child back because that's not helping them. When I'm telling them don't hit, or we use, nice words, then I just all of a sudden hit the child or bite the child, I'm not teaching them. So we have to keep that in mind.